people from Austin in the chat. So I'm in Pennsylvania. So if anybody's here on the East Coast with me, hi. So thanks so much for having me. I'm assuming that everyone is here because you either love, live with, or have loved or lived with or trained a complex dog, which is where my sort of area of expertise is. My lived experience is with my dog. So I'm Jess Adam, and my sort of passion project is called Handlers and Humans. It's a coaching service and support service that kind of brings together human mental health, dog training, dog guardianship, all together. And I'm really grateful for Miranda inviting me to talk about how to cope a little bit better with your canine today. So that's what we're gonna get into. So just a quick agenda so you know kind of what we're gonna cover. We're gonna talk a little bit about my story with Dio, who is my dog. He is 10 years old. And kind of how I came to do this work and why I think it's important, and what Handlers of Humans is and what it does and all of those things. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the coping skills themselves, right? Why taking care of our mental health matters, how it can help our life with our dog overall, and the ideas that I go to all the time in my coaching work to help people cope better with their canines. So we're going to make a little toolbox, so to speak, of strategies to help manage your emotional well-being and manage your dog at the same time. So this is Dio and I in our most recent fun little photo shoot that we had. I have a lot of different roles, and I really bring them together in support of the mental health of humans in the dog world. So I am not a dog trainer. I am a mom to a reactive dog. I am a licensed therapist by day, I guess you could say. And I'm a mom of twin toddlers. I'm a professor of counseling. I'm a lot of different things. And I bring a lot of those experiences together here in this work to help people address the human side of the dog training experience. So I like to say that if you're a dog lover of any kind, this is the training your dog would send you to if they could. So my dog, Dio, is 10 now, like I said before. So I've really been navigating behavior stuff and reactivity for a long time with him. We've really come a long, long way. I'm really proud of that. I've done all of the training things that you could possibly think of, all the classes and practice and socialization stuff. And if you name it, we've probably done it. But Dio still has reactions sometimes. We, like I said, have come a very long way. There are things that we do together now that we can do together now that we were never able to do when he was younger. But there are also things that he still isn't able to manage without having sort of a risk of behaviors, right? So I really, really, really struggled emotionally when Dio was young, especially when I was learning what reactivity even was. I was unprepared to have a dog in general, let alone a dog with behavioral challenges. I didn't even know that any of this was possible. And I can still have a hard time now if we have a rough moment. I need to lean on my supports. I need to lean on my coping skills too if, he struggles. So it's my experience in the mental health field as a therapist, coupled with my real life experience having a reactive dog for the last decade that kind of led me to create Handlers and Humans, because I understand what you go through as someone who loves a complex dog, and as a therapist, I have an understanding of the things that can help um, with what you go through with your dogs. So what I do with Handlers and Humans itself isn't therapy, but it's all informed by my background in the mental health field. And like I said as well, I'm not a dog trainer. My work is about humans. It's about how to support you, because you are the one who needs the support in order to support your dog, right? The work I do kind of exists in that space where I help the person support their dog. So I'm going to use terms like reactive and complex and challenging and difficult dogs and things like that, like probably interchangeably, just so you know. So for our purposes, I'm referring to any challenging issues with dogs, aggression, anxiety, just generally a dog that has some impact on our life in those ways. So the first thing, here's Dio and I having an ice cream date together. Let's start with just a moment of connection. If you feel comfortable, if you could share in the chat, what was your vision for life with your dog before you got them, right? What did you envision having with a dog before you even picked them up from the shelter or the breeder or the foster or wherever? What were your hopes for that? If anyone has that in mind? I'm curious. Training demo. Training demo dog. That's a good one. I feel like I was hoping for a similar thing, but from a therapy standpoint, Miranda. So Miranda wanted her dog to be a training demo dog. That was the vision she had. So for me, right, I'm a therapist. So I wanted a therapy dog, right? I wanted a therapy dog to come to work with me every day. I had experience doing animal assisted therapy. I really was hoping that I could create an animal assisted therapy program in my practice. And in addition to that, I wanted what so many people want, which is the like go everywhere, do everything with you, take your dog everywhere with you kind of dog, right? I thought all my friends had that dog too, so that's what I was hoping for. Dio had other plans. He did not think that that's what he was born to do, which is true now, but at the time it was hard to kind of accept that. So I adopted him. He was 6 months old, didn't know anything about dogs in general, let alone reactivity. His rescue said, he's young enough to do anything with training, right? Anything. Training can have him go in any direction. And I didn't know that that's not necessarily the case, right? I didn't know how many things he had experienced in his short life where he was in quarantine from parvo. He had all sorts of different things. He was bounced around and all of that before after he was surrendered to the shelter. I didn't understand that how much genetics would matter. I didn't know dogs could have anxiety. I didn't understand that that was a possibility, right? So I thought, great, I have this blank slate young dog, right? So we start training and it was a disaster, which is a story for another day. But so many things in our life felt like a disaster for so long at the beginning there. He was having reactions constantly. It was hard to even leave the front door. He was guarding things. Like I regularly came back from walks in tears when I was trying to walk him when he was younger. And then even once we found training that was finally helpful to us and where I could see that, this is going to be something that's going to help us get through this over time, I would feel too paralyzed sometimes to actually implement it. I would feel too overwhelmed to practice. I resented him for not being that dog that I wanted, that dog that I envisioned. I resented him for all the extra management, the emotional energy that he required. No one in my life had a dog that needed all of this thought, right? All the time. I felt frustrated that everyone around me seemed to have a dog that just like fit into their world, right? It wasn't this uphill battle all the time. I knew it would be work to get a dog, right? We all understand that. We all expect that, right? But I never imagined that it would be like it was. So over the first couple of years, he had some really intense incidents, and it, it really would knock me down every time something really rough would happen. After every rough moment, I was devastated, truly, right? I would feel shame, along with that frustration, along with that resentment, anxiety that was going to happen again, anxiety that was going to get worse, on and on. I got judgment from people in my life, judgment from strangers on the street, all of those things that we experience when we have a kind of a tough dog. So at the time, I was simultaneously determined to fix it, right? But I was also paralyzed sometimes by my own emotional state and struggling to stay consistent in training and struggling to want to try to practice the things that I was learning. So after one of our really big moments and incidents, I realized that what we were doing was not sustainable, right? I really got to that point where I said, I'm not sure if I can keep this dog. I'm not sure if I can keep doing this. It's not that, the behaviors themselves weren't difficult, they were, but it was also the intensity of my emotional state that was draining me more than anything. It was the way I looked at our situation, the way I felt about our relationship, the expectations and the assumptions that I had. Those things were making it so much harder to keep going. And you would think that as a therapist, I could manage that, right? I would know how to cope with that easily, but therapists are humans too, right? So we're going to struggle. We're going to forget to apply the things that we know. We're going to have our own meltdowns and all of that, just like anyone else. But I ultimately realized that something really had to change because I was doing all of the training things. There was nothing more to do when it came to him, right? It was really that I had to start looking at myself. So as an experiment, I started applying the skills, the tools, the things I taught to my therapy clients in my work. I would start practicing breathing and grounding myself before we would leave for walks. I started really purposely recognizing and trying to celebrate the tiny bits of progress that I would see, and bring awareness to those things, bring awareness to the story I was telling myself day to day about him, about our relationship, our life together. And I let go of the therapy dog goal too. I accepted that that might never happen for us, which was hard, right? That was a grieving process for me. And my trainers were wonderful about it, and they still supported us towards that goal. And we actually went on to pass therapy dog evaluation as well as the canine good citizen evaluation at the time, and he did start coming to work with me briefly. And then I realized that even though he passed the tests, that just meant that he could perform the behaviors when I asked him. That didn't mean that doing therapy work was actually a good fit for him, and it really wasn't. So we stopped doing that work, and I did have to grieve that expectation. So, like I said, we've come a long, long, long way, but he's still, I would still call him a reactive dog. He still is who he is. But the change in both of us, when I took really good care of me, right? When I paid more attention to me, than I was, that was undeniable. That change lasted. It shifted my outlook. It shifted our relationship. So even though I still struggle sometimes with those reactive moments, I don't dread them in the way that I did before. I don't feel like when I'm about to put the leash on and go for a walk that I am already at a 7 out of 10 of anxiety before I even leave the door, wondering what's going to happen, right? I feel a deeper connection to him, and believe it or not, I feel a sense of gratitude for what his reactivity has taught me, about myself. And I never would have gotten to that place or started doing this work that I love with Handlers and Humans without focusing more on myself than I was focusing on fixing my dog, right? So it's okay if you're not there right now. It's okay if you're in a place where you're like, how could I possibly be grateful for this? And you may never, and that's okay too. I couldn't have imagined that either. But I want you to know that it is possible to cope better with what you experience with them. It is possible to feel differently about these things. It's important to take care of yourself as well as you take care of them, right? So, working on my part in things really helped me to keep showing up through the years of ups and downs, right? It it can be a lifelong journey, to have a dog like this sometimes. So we have to find ways to create sustainability for ourselves, to stay in it in the long haul with them. So that is why that's kind of how I arrived at doing this work overall. So I'm curious, so you just heard about Dio and I and my emotions and what I experienced. If you feel comfortable, how does your dog impact your mental health? Like if you could drop some emotion words in the chat, what are some of those emotions that come up when you're dealing with the reactivity, when you're dealing with the anxiety, the different behavior issues that you're navigating? Is it fear? Is it frustration? What kind of things come up? How does your dog impact your mental health? Frustration, fear, shame. Shame is a huge one. Huge, huge, huge with dogs like ours. Yeah. Disappointment. That's fair. Failure. Yep. Yeah. Thanks for sharing those. So, those emotional experiences, we can all relate to versions of them at one time or another with our dogs, right? Maybe you're someone who's even been to therapy, and even if you've used coping skills effectively, in other areas of your life, just like I didn't sort of realize that I could bring my knowledge into my life with my dog, you might forget or not recognize that you can also bring those coping skills into your relationship with your dog, as well. So, training, right? It's all dog centric, right? Makes sense, of course, but it's all about them. Typically, training doesn't check in with you where you're at or what you need. And there are wonderful, amazing dog trainers who hold space for their clients naturally and are amazing at supporting us in that way. But it's not automatically baked into like what the goal of training is, right? That's not necessarily something that's automatically a part of it. So working with our complex dogs brings up a lot of messy emotions, and it can really get in the way, right, of our training progress with them. And one of the biggest challenges that we can have, and we don't always realize, is that the things that we feel with our dogs, right? Whether it's frustration or disappointment, or if we feel like failures or we feel shame, those things can also parallel other areas of our lives where we also struggle, right? So sometimes the shame or guilt or anxiety or whatever it is that we feel in relation to our dog's behavior gets amplified by past experiences of those same emotions, right? So an example is someone who's struggles with like maybe anxiety in general in their life, having their dog bring anxiety to the surface over and over and over again every day, is going to have a huge impact on your relationship with them, on your training progress, and all of those things. Our dogs don't really let us look away from our emotions. They don't really let us look away from our stuff, right? They keep bringing it up over and over again. And that's how really our dogs are giving us a beautiful opportunity to heal. They're inviting us to work on our stuff, so to speak, and sometimes they're requiring that we work on our stuff for their sake so that we can keep showing up. So I would really encourage you to take a look at the biggest of those challenging emotions that you mentioned that you feel about your dog. Um, and see if there are other areas of your life where those things have come up in the past or where they're present right now, so that you can recognize that you might be feeling those things in a bigger way and your dog is bringing them to the surface over and over again. And it's not all about them, it's not all related to them, although they are a part of it. So, on top of that, as if that's not enough, right? Um, is the fact that our emotional state has a huge impact on our behavior, on our actions. We're going to talk more about this in terms of how to cope with that in a few minutes. But if you're feeling constantly hopeless, anxious, frustrated, ashamed, right? It's just harder to connect with our dog and train our dogs, all right? If you're feeling all of those things, it's just harder to show up for that long haul journey that this can be sometimes. So you're here because you're the type of person who's really committed to your dog. Dog owners like us invest so much of ourselves, our money, our time, our energy in training, as we should, right? But if our focus is only ever on what they need, it becomes really hard to over and over again kind of pour from an empty cup, right? Because we're not supporting ourselves, we're not taking breaks, we're not paying attention to our mindset. All of those things can lead to burnout for us. So I'm speaking from personal experience there, and from what I see with my coaching clients and with handlers and humans. Right, when we hit that wall, we suffer, and so does our relationship with our dog, because again, we expect the typical care of dogs, but we didn't necessarily expect what we're what we're working through right now. So it's important to remember that part of caring for a dog is caring for yourself. Part of the work that you should expect to do to care for them well is also caring for you. That helps you continue to show up years after year, year after year, right? Because I remember Dio being 2, and thinking to myself, I don't know how I'm doing this for the next 8 to 10 years of our lives. Like, I don't know that that's possible for me. So it felt like staring down this really overwhelming, journey that I didn't know that I could handle. So creating that sustainability is why it's important to have mental health for dog people, right? You're responsible for your dog's well-being. And I just really, if you take nothing else away from this today, I want you to remember that their well-being is yours. It relies on yours. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about some tools that you can use to help you with that. So in dog training, you may have heard of this concept of a dog being over threshold, right? If you're not familiar, it just means that your dog is sort of past their limit of comfort or feeling safe. They might be in that fight, flight, or freeze mode, and the opposite of that could be right being under threshold. Your dog is calm. They can navigate a situation. They can attend to you. They can use their brain. And an over threshold dog is struggling to do that. So I hope that definition was okay. I'm not a dog trainer, but that's my understanding. And I did my best with it, but it's a common dog training concept that we can also use as a framework for what we go through as humans in many situations, not just with our dogs, right? I think it's interesting that we talk about being our dogs being over threshold, and but not necessarily the fact that we also can be over threshold. I know I have been over threshold many, many times in my life, not just related to Dio, but also related to him as well. It's not pleasant, right? So if I'm over threshold, it's likely so is my dog. So the first step to kind of coping with anything at all dog behavioral challenges included, is awareness, right? It just means knowing what is triggering you, what is getting you to that over threshold point, and what's going on behind the scenes in those moments so that you can address them. The having awareness is the first step to creating action around your triggers and around the things that are getting you to that point of being over threshold. So I'd like to hear for just for a second if anybody has ideas. What are the things that make you go over threshold when it comes to your dog? Not what puts your dog over thresholds, because we know all of that. But when you're over threshold with your dog, what is that? What causes that for you? What triggers that for you? For me, when he is barking a lot in the house, I can get very like I can become very overly sensitive to that and struggle. And also when he is reactive on the street and people are staring at me, I get very, very anxious about those moments. So those are my over threshold moments with him. Being embarrassed or caught off guard, by something you don't have control over and thought you did. That's a really good example. When something feels so out of your control like that, it's hard. Yeah. Any other ideas of when you get over threshold with your dog? We focus so much on like, oh, he gets over threshold when he's too close to a dog, or he gets over threshold when a stranger, needs to come over, like the repairman or something like that, right? We don't pay as much attention to ours. Suddenly barking, lunging when I wasn't ready for it. Yeah. Yep. Definitely makes sense. On walks when he's reactive to everything and everyone, so much barking and pulling. Yeah, that can absolutely escalate you. So he's over threshold and then so are you, right? Totally makes sense. So, do you like this little image I found on Canva? I thought it was so cute. Little all the little dogs listening. So once we've kind of established a practice of bringing awareness to when we are over threshold and checking in with our needs, our triggers, our feelings, then we can turn to action. Then we can turn to building more of a toolkit for coping that targets our mindset, targets our ability to regulate, and helps us take care of our emotional and physical needs, right? So when we're talking about coping with our canines for the long term, it's helpful to remember that resilience is something that you can work to build and that you actually have to work to build. It's not something that, we all have the inherent capacity to create resilience in our lives, but we need to bring some awareness to that and do something to kind of get there. So resilience is really it's a set of skills that we build for ourselves to lean on, right? So I'm going to share some ideas that are the biggest part of my toolkit for coping with my dog and his challenges. And there's some of my favorite concepts to keep in mind, but these are it's not an exhaustive list. I'm just going to kind of choose a few that I think are really impactful for us to talk about tonight. And know that not all of it necessarily will resonate with you, and everyone's toolkit is going to look different. So this is going to give you some ideas to start with. But there's so many different things and strengths that you can kind of pull from in your life. So start to think about how you can mindfully and intentionally build skills to help yourself work through triggers that are related to your dog, right? Both in the moment itself when you're struggling and in that sort of emotional aftermath that comes, right? When you're still stuck on it, when you're still ruminating about it, when you're still upset about it for the next day or 2 days or a week or something like that, right? We've all been there. So the first piece in our toolkit is using our strengths. This is something that I love because it doesn't require us to do anything different. It really leans on things that are already there for us. We all have inherent strengths and all of our strengths are different. So just like I didn't realize at first that I could use my therapy skill set, so to speak, to help cope with my emotions better when it came to Dio, you might not realize that you have skills and strengths and successes that you can lean on and reference and build off of when you're working with your dog. So a strengths-based approach, it centers strengths and resources rather than centering issues and deficits, right? It's not to say that we ignore problems overall, but we just don't make them the only thing that we ever focus on. We find ways to support ourselves and support our dogs by using resources that are already there, whether they're internal or external. So let's talk about some ways to do this and what this could look like. Here's Dio, and I say his cat, Bat, because Bat really, Dio is Bat's favorite person. So they love to hang out together. So the first one is to look for wins, right? And make sure you're not dismissing them, right? How many of you see some success, even if it's small, but then kind of disregard it somehow, right? Tell yourself, like, it didn't count. Who's ever done this? I just want to see like a yes or like a me in the chat where you're like, yeah, like that walk was okay, but like it doesn't matter because X, Y, and Z happened afterwards. How many times do you kind of like ignore the wins or dismiss them? I'm gonna like raise my hand to say I do that all the time. Yeah, most of the time, someone said, yeah. Okay. It's fair. It happens. We're all guilty of that. So just because you may be struggling and you are struggling, right, doesn't mean that the wins don't count, right? We can honor things being challenging and progressing at the same time, even if that progress is slow. So helping remind ourselves that while there are setbacks and there are real challenges, right? We're not trying to do the, you know, it, turn the negative into a positive thing, which we'll talk about a little bit too. But we're trying to recognize that there are things that go well alongside of the things that are challenging. It helps us create a more accurate, balanced mindset about our training journey and our progress with our dogs. And it helps give those wins and those progress a little more airtime in our minds because our mindset impacts our emotional state, which we're going to get to in a little bit. Another way to use our strengths, okay, is to look for what already works, right? By thinking through other times you have faced and overcome challenges, right? I guarantee you, everyone who is here has been through a challenging situation in your life that you have pushed through, persevered through, come out the other side. So think about what helped you succeed through challenging moments in the past. What about your daily life with your dog is going well, and how can you try to replicate that, right? So here's an example from my journey with Dio. I was really motivated. I think I talked about this, maybe Miranda, to you guys in my trainer group, but I was really motivated to teach Dio to pee on command when I first got him because I didn't want to stand outside in the cold or the rain when when I was first like potty training him. So I was on point with leaving treats by the door. So I had them with me when I went outside so that I would never forget them. So I could always reward him in those moments. And then later, when I learned about how important it was and how helpful it would be for us to take high value treats on walks with us, right? It was a strength that I already had something in place that I could lean on that worked for me, that I had the treats stored by the front door, right? It's truly as simple as that. That was a strength that I had. That was something I already had built, and I could lean on that to help, build other skills with him. So, just think about things that you're already doing that are helpful and working for you guys, and see if you can apply them in other areas. And the next way to kind of use our strengths is to look at your inherent strengths, right? And your inherent qualities and use them. So some of our inherent strengths, the things that are just naturally our strengths everyone's look different. Those things might not be totally clear to us all the time. They might be harder for us to spot. But our strengths stand out when we think about things that we love, things that we love to do, things that energize us. When we ask yourself what parts of your life just light you up, right? What things um, allow you to connect with those things? What qualities do those activities require? So for me, like I love to ride horses, right? But that's not an easy sport to take on. So it takes a lot of determination to build your skill set as an equestrian. And I feel like determination is a strength of mine as a result of that, right? So it takes determination for me to engage in that activity that I love so much. So think about what qualities it takes for you to do the things that you love and care about, and also to deal with the challenges that come up in your life. Think about times where you have felt the most successful overall, and what are the things about you that helped you succeed in those moments? Was it your compassion? Was it your creativity, your curiosity, right? Is it the fact that you are a really great hands-on learner, right? Like, what are the things that have helped you in other situations, non-dog related? And can you bring any of them, to your dog training journey now? So we're going to do like a little mini exercise on this. Here's a list of strengths on the screen, just some examples of strengths. And I apologize if you hear toddlers screeching. They're on their way to bed right now, my kiddos. So I want us to take a moment and just skim the list and think of one of these words that you feel like can describe you. Just skim it quickly, don't overthink it. What's one word that pops out at you that you can say, I think, yeah, like I would describe myself this way. So if you're comfortable sticking it in the chat, I'd love to hear what some of your strengths are if you're able to identify one of them. I'm going to do it too. Ooh, I'm going to go with intuitive for mine. I'm going to put it in the chat. Open-minded, it's a good one. Problem solving. Awesome. Proactive, that's a good one. Great. Okay. So there's so much value in spending time looking at this because you can probably think of many ways if you sit down and journal about it, which I encourage you to think about how is being someone who's good at problem solving something you can use in your dog training journey. How is being a proactive person something you can use in your dog training journey, right? And if you need a little extra help figuring out your strengths, if you feel like you're not sure how to describe yourself, other people who know you and care about you and love you in your life, they are really good at pointing out our strengths for us when we have a hard time identifying them. So ask people in your life how they would describe you. Ask people you trust to name the things that they think describe you, and then consider whether you agree or disagree with those and how you can use those strengths with your dog. So that's the strengths-based tool that we're going to talk about tonight. That's our first piece of our toolkit, is taking a strengths-based approach to our work with our dogs and our training journey with them. The next, oh, where did we not go? Here we go. The next piece, I call it regulation station, is regulating ourselves. This is a word that gets thrown around a lot, right? So regulation, it can be called self-control, emotional control, impulse control, different things like that. But these terms, they describe someone's ability to adjust their state, their energy level, and their emotions to help them attain goals, meet the demands of a situation around them, and gain a sense of well-being, right? So it's not possible to be regulated and stay regulated all the time. We all go in and out of different sort of levels of regulation. And I'm sure you can think of times, especially with your challenging dog, right? When you have felt dysregulated, when you maybe yelled or cried or felt frustrated, or you shut down, right? Dysregulation, it's kind of like that over threshold experience that we talked about, right? So one of the best practices that you can do for yourself and your dog is to check in with whether you're feeling regulated or dysregulated before engaging with them, right? So before the walk, check in with yourself. Before you decide to start practicing something, like some sort of training piece that you're supposed to be doing, check in with yourself. If you're not feeling like your current emotional state, your current state of regulation can help you and support you and your dog to navigate whatever might happen in that training session or on that walk, either don't take the walk at all, make a different plan, or spend some time helping yourself regulate first before you do those things. So when you pay more attention to your own regulation, you aren't starting out at a disadvantage with kind of that empty, like emotional gas tank, right? When you need to engage with your dog, when you need to walk them, when you need to take them to the vet, whatever it is, right? So really the key here is asking yourself what you need first. Asking yourself, how am I feeling first? So before taking Dio to the vet, right, I might check in with myself and say, I'm not really feeling very regulated right now. What do I need so that I'm in a better place to handle whatever might happen at this visit to the vet, right? I'm going to help myself support both of us through that moment before we even go. So there's lots of ways to help yourself regulate, right? So you can practice deep breathing, engaging your senses, moving, stretching, changing your environment, and very importantly, making sure your basic needs are met, right? So meaning like, do I need a drink of water? Am I hungry right now? Do I need to rest first? Those are the building blocks of regulation. And when those needs aren't met, you're not going to function as your best self, right? So when we have challenging dogs, complex dogs, we spend a lot of time evaluating and planning for their needs, right? And their regulation. We try to anticipate all of the things that can help things go well for them. Again, as we should, right? We do it a lot more than most dog owners do, right? So before a walk, we might prepare, like the high value treats to bring with us. We're going to think about what route we're going to take with them. Before the vet, we make a game plan to, help them get into the vet office as safely as possible. So we pay attention to all of these things, their diet, their fulfillment, their environment, right? And all of those things we do to help our dogs stay regulated. And we just don't do it for ourselves almost ever in these situations. And we focus so much on theirs that we forget about ours. So in this particular coping tip, right, this particular piece of the toolkit, it's about supporting your regulation, not only to find and practice these things that help you regulate, whether it's breathing or, fueling your body or moving or singing or any of those things, but to make sure you're regularly, consistently checking in with yourself to give yourself what you need before, during, and after you engage with your dog in any way. So before you decide to walk them, before you take them out into the world or do anything with them that might lead to stress for either of you, stop and ask yourself what you need to set you both up for the best chance of success. So really quick, I just want to hear what's one go-to regulation strategy that you like to use for yourself that you already have in your toolkit? Are you a deep breathing person? I love to drink water, have a cup of tea, something to ground me. That's my go-to. What's something that you can use to help regulate yourself with your dog? We can make a mini list together by putting an idea or two in the chat. So mine's getting a drink of water. Ooh, square and box breathing. That's a good one. I'm going to put mine in the chat, getting a drink of water. Box breathing girl too. I love it. It's a good one. I teach that one a lot. Calm music. I like a good affirmation. Repeating a good affirmation. That's a good one too. Slow down literally. Do the 5 things I see, 5 things I hear. Yep, a grounding exercise using your senses. That's great. Awesome. Okay. So look, right now we have a mini list in our chat of things that we can practice to regulate ourselves. So I just want you to experiment over the next week with doing whatever your regulation strategy is, or another one in the chat if it feels like, oh, I want to try that one. Do that for 3 to 5 minutes before you engage with your dog, before you go on a walk, before you do a training session, before you take them to the vet, whatever, doesn't matter what it is. Just see how that affects you and how that impacts you, just as an experiment. Okay. So our next piece has to do with mindset. Our next strategy has to do with mindset. So this is going to be a very simplified mindset discussion because I could do several lectures just on mindset, but we're going to talk about it as a piece of our toolkit anyway. So a big misconception about working on our mindset is that we're trying to change negative thoughts to positive ones. And that's not actually what we're trying to do. And that actually isn't typically a very helpful approach either, because it can feel very invalidating, right? When someone tells us to just think positive, just look at the positives only, right? When we're facing some very real challenges with our dogs, some very real difficulties with them. What we're going through with our dogs it's not just in your head, right? You have evidence to say that they behave this way or this incident happened or all those things. So it's hard to just think positive when you're dealing with behavioral challenges that are very real. But what we want to try to do with our mindset instead is to work on shifting our thoughts to go from unhelpful to helpful, from negative, not to positive, but perhaps to neutral, right? We want to ask ourselves, is this thought accurate, or is my perspective skewed or biased in some way, right? So the questions that we want to use to evaluate our mindset and evaluate our thoughts when it comes to our dog is this thought accurate, or is this thought helpful, right? So notice how we're not saying, is this a positive thought or a negative thought? We're focusing on making our thoughts and the stories we tell ourselves about life with our dogs accurate and helpful instead of positive or negative. That's much more effective and appropriate to do versus just think positive. Because that doesn't really quite work the way we think it should, right? So here's Dio eating an ice cream cone. Close up. I love this picture. So here's why we do this, and here's why we use these questions to evaluate our thoughts and our mindset. So first, a situation or trigger of some kind occurs, and it spurs us to have a thought about it. Maybe it's something like my dog lunged, my dog barked, my dog ripped apart their bed, which is my current example because Dio did that recently. So those triggers, those situations, those things that happen, they're just things that occurred in the environment. They're actually neutral things, but we assign meaning to them, right? We have a thought about them. But everyone has different thoughts and reactions to similar events, right? That's why some people out there in the world, I am not this type of person at all, but some people are not fazed by their dog's behavior, but we are, right? I have seen dogs who are lunging and barking and running away and all of those things. And the meaning that their owner assigns to that situation is like, oh, dog just being a dog, right? They are not feeling shame. They're not feeling anxiety. They're just like, oh, my dog's just being a dog, right? Meanwhile, I could I could never have that response about it. The thoughts I have about those types of behaviors from my dog are, oh my gosh, everyone is going to think I'm a terrible dog owner. Oh my gosh, my dog is out of control. Oh my gosh, we're regressing in all of our training. Everything's falling apart. Training isn't going to work, like on and on and on, right? I go down a whole other spiral when I have those situations or triggers come up, but it's my thought that is different than someone else's. So our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors are all linked, right? So if my thought about a situation is, oh my gosh, Dio does this all the time, his reactivity is never going to get better, even if that thought is not accurate, because it isn't, because there are times where he reacts but not as badly, or he recovers very quickly, or maybe he actually had a great walk and he didn't react at all that day. But even if it's not an accurate thought, my emotional state is going to be impacted by the thought of, oh my gosh, this is never going to get better. He does this all the time, right? It's not going to be a hopeful, energized, optimistic emotional state when that's what I'm thinking about this trigger. It's going to be defeated or anxious or frustrated or, any of those things. And when I'm feeling those things, my behavior is impacted too, right? So if I'm feeling defeated and hopeless, I might walk Dio less. I might, I don't know, throw in the towel on training for 3 months and just like let let it happen, right? I might be more sluggish with him. I might not try really hard to make sure that I'm doing the things that I'm supposed to do to help him. Um, as a result of my behavior being impacted, my thoughts and feelings are going to be reinforced as my environment and my dog end up responding to my behavior. So, in the spirit of just kind of creating a more accurate and helpful mindset about life with our dogs, let's just use an example, so we can see the chain reaction of that cycle that we just talked about. So the trigger, the situation is going to be the same in this example. So this is going to be taking my reactive dog for a walk. That's the trigger, that's the situation. So the thought that I have about that is my dog always misbehaves and I don't know how to stop them. I can't do anything about it, right? So then that thought leads me to feeling frustrated, anxious, defeated. And when I feel that way, I might do things like grip the leash even tighter. I might be less patient with him. My timing of reinforcement might be thrown off because of it. My breathing may be more shallow. Maybe he notices that in me. Like there's so many behavioral responses that I'm having to my internal state. And while I do have a dog with reactive behaviors, and I do sometimes have a difficult time managing him through it, as I'm still learning how to, effectively manage him, it's not accurate to say it always happens because it doesn't happen the same way in every single circumstance. It doesn't happen every single time. It might happen 99% of the time, but maybe I did have a great walk where we did see another dog and we were able to move through it easily a couple of times last week, right? So it's not accurate to say he always does this. It's not accurate to say he is misbehaving, right? Because I do understand that his behavior is communicating his fear or his frustration to me. It's not misbehavior, it's communication. It's not accurate to say, I don't know how to handle it. I can't ever handle it. Because even though maybe I'm not doing it perfectly, right? Because I'm not a dog trainer and I really need to practice these things, I've still learned a lot from training that I have done so far. And I'm getting there. I'm working towards it. I'm learning how to implement things that can help us through those moments. So, in taking that same trigger, we'll go to the next slide, same trigger, taking your reactive dog for a walk, right? Same situation. if I ask myself what a more accurate and helpful version of that thought could be, it might look like this. My dog struggles sometimes on walks, and I am learning how to support him, right? So the emotions that come from this thought, from this way of talking to myself about our walks together, right, are much different. These emotions are they're reassured, they're more confident, they're more understanding. I might still have some anxiety, and that's fair and understandable, but it's not going to be as intense as the thought I used earlier, right? And therefore, my behavior towards my dog is going to look different too. My body might be able to be more relaxed in that state. I might be more likely to reinforce him. I might be feel more in tune with him, more present. I might smile and enjoy our walk a little bit more. Right. So you can see that the only thing we really impacted here was the way we talk to ourselves about taking our dog for a walk. And it changes that chain reaction. All of those things are linked. So this was a huge simplification of a very complex process, and there's a lot more to it, but like I said, I could do several lectures just on the mindset piece. But this is another piece of the toolkit to use to say, let me check in with this thought. Is this way I'm looking at the situation with my dog accurate? Is the way I'm looking at it with my dog helpful, right? So again, it's oversimplified, I know. But it gives you an overview to kind of get started. And it's important to know too that when we're feeling really emotional, right? When we are just very over our thresholds, our ability to work through our thoughts and our beliefs in this logical way that I kind of just described, it gets diminished. It's harder to do this the more emotional we are. But when we come back down from that emotional intensity, we don't often like look back at our thoughts or the way that we were talking to ourselves and thinking. We just kind of move on and move forward and dismiss it. So we never give ourselves an opportunity to use that capacity that we all have for neuroplasticity, our ability to change our brains and start shifting our mindset about our dogs and our training to be more helpful and more accurate, right? So to shift our mindset about life with our dogs, the practice is going to look like this. So we want to allow space for our feelings to be felt because, like I said, if we're feeling very, very emotionally activated, we can't quite do this work yet. But we just don't want to unpack and live there, I like to say, right? We want to take care of ourselves through our emotional moment and acknowledge our emotions. And when we come down, we can kind of work through this process of asking ourselves, how am I talking to myself about this situation, or about my ability as their guardian, or about training or whatever it is, and ask myself, is this an accurate thought? Is this a helpful thought? And if the answer is no, we want to look at the cycle of thoughts and feelings and behavior and see how it's being impacted. If we're able to kind of reframe that thought to be more accurate and more fair to ourselves, then we would want to be, looking at that cycle and seeing how it looks a little bit different. So again, this is a very nuanced, difficult skill. It takes a lot of repetition, a lot of repetition. And I'm really boiling it down and oversimplifying it. And there are so many factors that play into the way our thoughts are formed and why they stick around and look this way. So I know I oversimplified it, but that's your mindset piece for this toolkit. And then the last piece I want to talk about, my final and favorite concrete activity to help you cope better with your challenging, lovable, complex canine, is play, right? We know that play is so beneficial for our dogs, for their fulfillment, for enrichment, but we forget about how much joy and connection play can bring to us as well, how much we can benefit from play, right? Seeing Dio be the happy, wiggly, bouncy, big pit bull smile guy when we're playing tug, which is like his favorite game. Tug and flirt pole are his favorite things to do. Seeing those things is one of the best mood boosters that I have in my toolkit for life in general. And that is available to me anytime, right? Even 5 minutes of playing with him helps meet his needs, but it certainly also fulfills my need to reconnect to the love I have for him, frankly, when things are tough with him sometimes. Because when we're kind of like in the thick of it with them, right? We're trying to figure stuff out and work through behaviors and practice and train and fix stuff. We forget that those opportunities for connection and fun and joy, which again, those are the reasons that many of us love dogs and got dogs to begin with. Those things are always available to us in some way, and they're always available to us through play. So I really encourage you, if you're not sure how to connect with your dog through play, um, prioritize that in training. Ask your trainer for ideas or to work you through that. Or, I kind of had to be taught, to be honest with you, how to play with Dio in a way that connected us both, but a way that really he would love. So we forget that we can and we should balance those sort of negative moments, so to speak, with moments that feel positive, and play really helps us do that. Um, One of the reasons that this particular tool for the toolkit is so important to me and why I put it in here comes from my background in working with children, young children and their parents in therapy. So there's a particular evidence-based intervention that teaches child-centered interaction and play skills. Actually, it teaches parents how to appropriately and effectively play with their kids. So in this intervention, every single day, without fail, unconditionally, the parent is to spend 15 minutes with their child doing just what the child wants to do. The parent doesn't place any demands or expectations of the child during this time. It's called special time, actually. So during special time, the child has no demands on them, and the time is unconditional. It's consistent every day, regardless of the child's behavior. So it doesn't get taken away if the child has like quote unquote misbehaved that day. There are more elements obviously to the whole treatment than special time, but special time is a very important piece of it. And the most interesting thing about special time is that we find very often that just that alone is so helpful for their parent-child relationship and the child's behavior. Um, Often special time shows like creates change in that relationship and in their behavior just by itself. So if connection and play and immersing ourselves fully into the present moment with kids is that powerful, then the same thing can be true with our dogs. So I'd love for you to do an experiment with bringing more play and connection into your relationship with them, to do whatever it is that your dog loves the most, right? So again, for Dio, I said it's tug and flirt pull. Those are his like favorite, although finding treats also is up there because who doesn't love that? But whatever it is that your dog loves that brings them that joy that you can see like resonating from them, play fetch, play tug, try out nose work, whatever it is, practice being fully present and fully immersing yourself with them in those moments. Put your phone on do not disturb, put it down, spend this time bonding with them. It's a great way to reconnect with the joy, the fun, the present moment experience, which again, those are some of the best parts of having a dog, right? Those are some of the reasons we have dogs. Gives you the mood boost and the opportunity to strengthen your relationship and balance those tough, stressful moments that are very real and valid with, pieces of positivity and love and joy and connection. So, if you, however you're able, whenever you're able to, for your own mental health and for theirs, play with your dog. So, just curious, what does your dog love to do? What's going to be the thing that you pick? I honestly want to know, like, what are their go-tos? What makes your dog bouncy and happy? Even as like silly as chasing each other around in the yard or, you know, play ball, belly rubs on the grass. That's a good one. I love that. Nice. Chase or fetch, cuddling on the edge of a reclining chair. Nice. Okay. So commit to making sure that you put 10 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day, even of playing ball and belly rubs in the grass or playing chase or fetch every day, unconditionally. Make sure it's built in. That's going to be a huge piece of your toolkit. So that is our toolkit that we're going to have for tonight. So there's a couple strategies, a couple things to focus on that you can, again, prioritize different pieces of this, take what you really resonate with, leave the things that you don't resonate with, think about how you can bring in other things that you might lean on to cope with other situations of your life. But tonight we talked about using a strengths-based approach, by looking for wins, building on things that already work, using your inherent strengths to kind of keep working through training. We talked about checking in with yourself before you engage with them in some way to make sure that you're regulated, right? Ask yourself, what do I need? And give that to yourself. It could just be really simple: a drink of water, get a snack, 5 minutes of breathing, whatever it is. The list goes on, right? But practicing that self-regulation by meeting your basic needs, and filling your cup is going to help you show up as your best self for them, and help you work through those tougher moments. So we also talked about our mindset, how our thoughts impact our emotions, which then impact our behavior. So make sure you're asking yourself, how am I talking to myself about my life with my dog? Is this thought accurate? Is it helpful? If the answer is no, maybe do some journaling or reflecting to help identify some thoughts that are more accurate and helpful, to remind yourself of. And finally, we talked about play and how it's one of the greatest ways to access kind of joy and connection with our complex dogs, no matter what other things are going on. And again, ask your trainers about building play skills with your dog, because I truly needed to be taught not only about the importance of it, but how to do it, in a way that Dio connected with. So as kind of a recap, we all have capacity for building resilience, and we can actively support ourselves in building that resilience in our lives with our tough dogs, our lovable tough dogs. And I truly believe, in doing this work, with handlers and humans for several years now, and in my life with Dio, that training is really just a piece of it. It's just the beginning. The truth is that all dog behavior approaches in the world are not going to truly address the things within you that are being brought to the surface by your dog, right? So all of the training work isn't going to help you feel less anxiety, less shame, less guilt, less overwhelm in areas of your life. Even if we had a magic wand to change all of your dog's behavior overnight, if you're someone who's prone to anxiety, you're still going to experience anxiety. If you're someone who is, prone to perfectionism, like hi me, right? You're still going to struggle with perfectionism in other areas of your life. So those strong emotions that come up for us with our dogs can be tied to the emotions that we experience elsewhere in our life. So while it would be nice and helpful if our dog's behavior just suddenly magically got better, I would still be left with my anxiety and perfectionism tendencies to work through regardless, right? So my dog is just inviting me to learn better ways of coping with those feelings for their sake, for his sake, and for mine. And if your dog is still young and you're committing to the long haul with them, you're looking at, if you're lucky, another decade or so of walking through this life together. So creating sustainability within yourself and, in your relationship with your dog for that long haul journey, that's one of the most important things you can do to make that time that you have with them feel more meaningful, more joyful, despite the challenges, in addition to the challenges and the struggles that are valid and are also there, right? They're not easy, our dogs, right? And yet creating sustainable practices to help us kind of cope with that roller coaster, that up and down piece that we all have experienced, those are the things that are going to help you learn and grow and heal in so many areas of your life, and help you cope with your dog at the same time. So, my gosh, 8:02. Look at me, like on the dot almost with an hour. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to Miranda for inviting me. Thank you all for listening about my little passion project, here, Handlers and Humans. If you're looking for ongoing support, reach out. DM me, email me, let me know how it's going. I'd love to hear from people. So, yeah, that's what I have
Awesome.
for you. Let me stop share.
Jess,
There
do
we go.
you have a few minutes in case folks have
Oh
questions?
yeah, definitely.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
I
if
can
you
hang
have
out.
questions, put them in the chat now. While you're doing that, a couple of quick reminders. Jess, if people are looking to get in touch with you, what is the best way that they can find you?
Yeah, so you can email me. I'll put my email in the chat right now. Um, and I am pretty active on Instagram at Handlers and Humans. And you can find all info on my website. I'll put that in the chat too.
Awesome.
There you go.
Perfect.
Yeah.
handlersandhumans.com or handlersandhumans@gmail.com for
Yep.
email. Reminders, this is being recorded, so if you're watching this later, it's on YouTube. If you are looking for handouts or other things like that, go to Jess. She offers some cool things for trainers and for dog owners. So lots of cool stuff out there. Thanks for tuning in to another Every Dog webinar. If you still want to make a donation, you can do that at everydogaustin.org/donate. And we have a bunch of really cool webinars coming up this fall. We've got one about setting your dog up for success at the vet clinic. We've got one about recognizing pain in your dog, one about cognitive dysfunction as our dogs get older. So lots of really cool upcoming things. So stay tuned for information about all of those. And with that, thanks again so much to Jess, and we'll see you
Yeah,
next
thank
time.
you.
All right, bye.